Hi, everybody, and welcome into the first of the My Pets Wellness Weekly Wellness Podcast. My name is Kevin Crispin. I am the Chief of Staff at My Pets Wellness, and I'm also the host of this show. And so we're going to be various range of discussions that we're going to talk through. As you can see here, I have our Director of Wellness and Growth, Dr. Rodney. Dr. Rodney, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm really happy to be here with you and to share some of my ideas on these subjects.
Awesome. And I think the first thing that we're going to talk about is burnout. I think it's something, no matter what your field is, you hear that, but in the vet space, it's a very particular and a strong, there's a strong possibility that you're going to run into that burnout. So with your years of experience and your expertise, one of the things we wanted to get into with you is we all hear burnout. We've all probably to varying degrees have felt it. But what does that mean, burnout? What is going on in our bodies when we're feeling that burnout, when we start to feel that just hitting us?
It's an excellent question. I'm a trauma therapist, and actually what burnout is, and most people don't realize it, it's actually a trauma response to various categories of trauma.
Oh.
Burnout hits three of the major categories because when I'm facing burnout, I'm afraid.
Yep.
And part of the fear is I'm not exactly sure what's going on, and I don't even know how to fix it. It's just hitting me, and that produces some anxiety in me, and when that happens. It's also about the confusion. It's a different category of trauma. I'm just confused because obviously if I knew what to do next, I would do it, but I don't know what to do next. I don't know how to take the burnout feelings away. I don't know how to take that fear away. Another category that's impacted by the burnout situation is the category of control and expectations. That's a separate category of trauma. Most often it's the control and expectations of another person. In the case of work burnout, it's actually the control and the expectations of the job itself.
Yep.
And what's happening is it's just too much. I can't do it. I'm getting overwhelmed. And all of these are feelings that are trauma type responses. Trauma by definition is anything that makes me feel unsafe. So when I'm facing burnout, I'm facing fear, and I'm facing confusion, I'm facing control and expectations I can't meet, that's exactly the way it feels. I feel very unsafe.
I think that is that definition of trauma really is a really helpful definition because I think that really shows how simple trauma really can be. I think some people hear the word trauma and they think, something really cataclysmic. Thank you. That was traumatic. But so you're saying like, I'm afraid, I'm confused, and I have a control and expectations issues, right? So as far as when you break these down, do you break those down by one, or?
Right. There's actually 10 separate categories of trauma and trauma treatment.
Okay.
And they fit into those 10 categories. Actually, most trauma experiences touch on multiple categories within the overall subject of trauma. That all comes from Abraham Maslow's work in 1943 on the theory of human motivation. Our first level we have to have met is our survival needs of air, water, food.
Yes.
The second level, he said, after that is, we as human beings have to feel safe. So that's where the trauma comes in. Trauma is anything that makes me feel unsafe, which jeopardizes that second category that Maslow had, a second tier. And his research showed that a person can't feel unsafe over a long period of time. We all feel unsafe occasionally throughout a day, and then we find our way to get to safety. What burnout is, this is building up. It's touching all those other categories. And now I'm feeling unsafe over a longer and longer and longer period of time. So the longer you're in that state of burnout, the more intensive it gets.
And it becomes not sustainable.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then it's also related to what trauma is. 1968, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, PTSD. After experiencing trauma, it leads to stress, and that's what becomes a disorder. Because obviously when we feel unsafe, it's going to create stress, okay? And that's where the body comes in, because the research in the last 25 years has validated this, that when a human being feels stress, two things happen. Okay. I mean, multiple things happens, but the true primary things that happens to us in our body is when I feel stress, our body produces pro-inflammatory chemicals that are spread throughout our body. So when that happens, It impacts all of our organs because our organs begin to inflame. We'll start retaining water and fluids. We'll start bloating out. Nobody's familiar with this, right?
Is this like a defense mechanism that your body is
yes,
doing?
it's just the body can't handle the stress. It doesn't want to be in a stressful state. So obviously, when those pro-inflammatory chemicals are released in the body and your organs, then you start having problems with body functioning. You know, your organs start working in maladaptive ways, and you have to go to a doctor. You're going to start having problems with livers and kidneys and hearts, and that's what's really going on. Now, the second thing, which is very interesting to talk about in light of what we're currently going through in the world and the United States. Stress also reduces the immune system. It impacts it and makes it less effective. So pro-inflammatory chemicals and reducing the immune system.
That's like a double
What
shot.
does the immune system do for us? It protects us from viruses and bacteria and disease. So that's why most of us, when we're in burnout, when we're facing those kind of stress, we start getting sick more often, more susceptible to colds, flus, coronavirus, and those kind of things. And at the same time, my body isn't functioning right because of those pro-inflammatory chemicals. So then, in periods of burnout, that's why you end up having backaches, toe aches. I have headaches. I don't like the way I look because I'm gaining weight. It's all about it. But then also, I'm getting sick all the time.
Why is that?
Because your immune system is failing. So I'm more susceptible when all those things come at me, whether it's a cold or flu or coronavirus. It's just going to make it more regular and consistent.
Okay, great. So, and I guess obviously my pet's wellness, we work with veterinarians a lot, and I've been learning a lot about the veterinarian profession over the past year. I believe that you have as well. And this is a pretty high burnout rate that we see there. So I think with those things you're talking about, pro-inflammatory chemicals, and then your immune system dropping, what is something, as maybe if I'm a veterinarian and I feel myself getting closer and closer to this burnout, what are things that I can do to either relieve the stress? Like, is it things like exercise? What type of things will help dispute what the body's trying to do?
Yeah. Well, obviously, you want to remove the stress as much as you can.
Yeah.
But the stress in these work time situations come from the fact that I have to meet the expectations of the clinic, veterinary clinic. I have to meet the expectations of the individual clients and their pets. And that gets really out of control at times because they don't think we're doing enough for their pet. But then on the same time, I've got a family back home that has expectations for me. So
it's a whole other thing, right?
Yeah,
you leave there and then you have to go be with your family. Yeah.
And so what you have to do is begin to manage that.
Okay.
And it's very hard to do at times when everything has become unmanageable and I have more to do than I have time to do it.
Yeah.
And then again, get this cycle. Now I'm feeling the stress. I have more to do than I have time to do it, which makes me less effective, which ratchets up the stress because now I can't even accomplish what I normally accomplish and I'm getting further behind. It's like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and it just gets worse and worse.
So you have to get help. Now, what I mean by help is you have to try to maybe work with somebody else if you can't figure it out yourself. How can I manage all these responsibilities? How can I minimize the stress of the clients and who have the pets? Or how can I manage the stress at home? Or how can I manage the stress at work? It comes down to reorganizing your schedule and trying to just don't have too high expectations of yourself. That's that trauma category. I have to have realistic expectations of what I'm able to accomplish, because when I'm able to manage it, then the stress begins to go down, even though I might not be fulfilling all the responsibilities that I think I have. Can you meet the responsibilities that everybody in the world has for you? No, I only can meet the responsibilities I place on myself. It's the mark that I have to achieve. I can't worry about what everybody else expects from me. I just have to meet my own expectations. And so when burnout happens, I'm trying to meet the expectations of everybody else, and I don't even know what I expect of myself, but I recognize that I'm expecting too much.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Oh, of course.
So,
and it hits home for sure.
Now, you could try to do that work on your own, but most of the time you have to have somebody that can support you, somebody that understands that pressure at work, maybe talking to another veterinarian, maybe talking to the family itself. You start communicating and saying, I am overwhelmed, I'm feeling this stress. It's impacting me. I've got to manage it. And so you get help. You find somebody that understands the stress that you're under specifically, because they might be going through the same thing. And then you start making decisions on what do I have to eliminate as an expectation for myself because it's too much for me. And you just start working that problem.
And working on that, the expectations you have for yourself, and you're talking about having too high of expectations. What are some things that people can do? Because from my own personal experience, I'm obviously not a veterinarian, but in stressful situations, I put too high of expectations on myself. So if you're working with perhaps another veterinarian, somebody in a support function, what are some things you can do to help identify what are things you can and cannot handle and to allow you to accept that?
Yeah. Well, those are really good questions. But again, that's where you need to actually be talking to somebody else.
Okay.
Because you might have some ideas, but you might not be seeing the big picture of what is actually something I need to do and what I think is something I can let go of. And so when you're working with somebody as a support person, that's what it is, okay? You're just going to be talking to them about it and bouncing ideas on them, and then they can give you a perspective so that eventually you can come to the right conclusion. That's why in most situations like what we're dealing with in My Pet's Wellness, it'd be my opinion that the worst people you can go to are the people in your clinic, because it's too close of a relationship and then they're under the same pressure. So you find another vet somewhere else who may have had the same experience and say, these are all the responsibilities and expectations I have to meet. I can't meet all of them. Do you see one that maybe I can readjust? Because see, they don't have a stake in that local clinic. So it's the safe person from outside that understands what I'm going through is usually in the best position to give the proper perspective on what can actually be ratcheted down. By the way, stop giving yourself too high expectations. It's creating stress.
Oh. Well, that'll be it for today. So, no, I'm just kidding. I mean, it's so true, and thank you for the reminder. And it's like perspective is what we always need, and it takes us. It's so often very hard to get. And having that outside person, as you say so well, they're going to look at it from a more objective angle. And they're going to say, well, this, and this. And you're going to be like, oh, I wasn't even focusing on that. And at My Pet's Wellness, obviously we want to create an environment where, as you said, so we're in the clinic, but we want to create an environment where if I'm a veterinarian, I can reach out to other tools within the company to get that support. Right. So it's something that we want to offer them. And you as the Director of Wellness and Growth, that's something that you are building as well.
Right. That's correct.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when trauma creates the stress leads to the disorder and it has that impact on the body. What's actually happening though is you're just so confused and overwhelmed you can't kind of figure out what to do next. You have to find in this support person somebody that's not going to be judgment critical, and they have to be willing to listen. They have to be willing to be supportive of you. They have to have this sympathy and empathy. So you have to have somebody that understands what you're actually feeling. But then you have to take steps to reduce the expectations that are upon you, either from the outside or on yourself. I've got to manage that because it's going to just get worse and worse. Do you see what I'm saying?
Of course.
Because the more your body produces those chemicals and your body inflames, and the more that your immune system is reduced, you become less and less effective. So if I am overwhelmed and I have too much to do, I have to lower some expectations so that I can meet the other expectations. And
they're perceived that, at this too high of expectations, I think that what a lot of us don't realize we're doing is we have perceived expectations that, let's say you and I are here and let's say you're my boss. You've never said any of these perceived expectations I have in my head, but I am now judging myself by those. And that is causing an immense amount of stress.
You are absolutely 100% right.
Yeah.
We always want to talk about the expectations that everybody has for me. In reality, we're our own worst enemies. Most of the time, the expectations are not from the outside. It's the expectations that I have for myself. Now, the client who has this sick cat or dog has expectations. You take care of the pet, and sometimes those can be high and unrealistic. But usually it's the vet themselves who's that's what I'm supposed to do. And so I have this unrealistic expectation that I can always easily fix every dog or cat very quickly, and that's not a realistic expectation.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And working with veterinarians, I've learned more about things that I never considered with the profession. Something as simple as you were to bring in your dog who's old, and unfortunately, there's nothing else we can do for it. We would need to euthanize the pet. It's obviously a very solemn procedure, and it's something that the vet really needs to be with the client, with the patient, experiencing that with them. That's gonna be a lot. And then the next appointment might be a new puppy, and that person who brought the new puppy in is so happy about the puppy, and so you have to be like, oh, you have to transition.
Yeah, transition. Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Now, there's one other aspect of this that I think is very important to understand that kind of relates to the others. When I'm caught in this cycle and I'm becoming less and less effective, it just builds up and it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. Making me less and less effective. How do we heal from trauma? Actually, it's not that complicated. There's no trauma therapist in the world that has Harry Potter's magic wand. I just wave it over you and say, go away. Actually, the way we know that a person overcomes their trauma experiences by talking, by sharing. Just talking about it helps, because every time you talk about how you're feeling, you see it in a different way. You see it in a better way. And it's the mere process of talking about what I'm feeling is I begin to see it in a different way. I can process it on my own, and then I can make the changes that I need. You don't even have to have a highly intelligent support person. It just has to be somebody that's willing to listen to you, because they're not helping you to heal. You're healing yourself as you talk about it. Now, what do most of us do when we feel stress? I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to keep it inside, and then that body goes and does its thing. So not only do you find a support person to actually help you readjust those expectations, but you have to be talking to your husband, your wife, your friends, not even looking for solutions, just sharing with them. These are the feelings that I have. But see, we're all too... We try to protect ourselves from people seeing us in the wrong way. And so we don't want to tell the truth. We just want to hide the truth. And then somebody comes up to you and says, hey, Kevin, how you doing? You're going to say, fine.
I'm fine. Now,
in treatment, we have an acronym for what fine means.
Oh, what is it? Oh, you can't say that right now.
No.
Okay, that's fair.
Well, some of it is insecure, neurotic, and emotional. You can figure out what that is.
And I think what you're saying, I'm a firm believer in as somebody who's suffered from anxiety most of my life. And I've been all of the letters of fine. And I realized a while ago that if I just start talking about the crazy things that have stressed me out and worried me, one, I realize I'm not alone, and there are other people out there. And two, that gives that person an opportunity, somebody else who's hearing that story, like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who's dealing with this stress. And I think at My Pet's Wellness, as we build out, we have, and we bring on more and more veterinarians, we hope to foster that type of a discussion so that people can understand that, it's a really hard job, really hard. Compassion fatigue is going to set in, but we have this family here that we want to make a safe space for you to not do this, but to, to speak.
Because see, again, when you're in your local clinic, maybe you're the doctor and you start talking to the other people in the hospital, they're going to, their view of me is going to change, so you are going to do this. But we provide a network way beyond the local clinic of people that understand what they're feeling. And that's where you can go and just be real and talk about your feelings. And it's an important part of that process. If you find somebody and you want to talk to them and they're going to become judgmental and critical, and then you got the wrong person. Again, the real safe person is just going to listen. They're going to have that sympathy and empathy. They're going to be able to understand how you feel. That's when you heal, by talking, okay? But we're so afraid of being vulnerable, aren't we? But vulnerability is a part of the healing process. How can I heal from something unless I talk about it? I mean, if I can't share with somebody how I feel, all I can do is bottle it up
And
inside
then
of me.
push it down further
And then I'm
further.
repeating the whole cycle, which creates the stress, and I got pro-inflammatory chemicals spilling throughout my body, and my immune system crashes, and I'm getting sick, and then I can't go to work, and now I'm further behind than when I started.
And then I'm worried about my job. Right.
Yeah, you see what's happening?
Yeah.
It's so you have to be aware. Obviously, the earlier in that burnout process, you can get a handle on this and go away from this. I'm going to hold it inside and try to figure it out myself. The earlier you can reach out for help, find somebody to help you to readjust those priorities or those expectations, and also to just begin to talk to people. The earlier that you get to that process, the simpler it is to get out of it. If you've been feeling burnout for days, weeks, months, it's going to take you a while to come back out of that.
Yeah.
So as soon as you begin to recognize it's happening, I've got to take action for myself.
Yeah.
Because that's when I'm going to be in the best position to be effective at work and at home.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. And I do. And this has been really enlightening because one of the great things about having conversations like this in the same vein is like we think, okay, well, I know what trauma is. I know what stress is. But then if you talk about it with somebody and you hear other perspectives, you're like, oh, and then that helps you identify your own. Right.
Exactly.
And so I think this has been a really great conversation on that. So I appreciate your time today. And again, as we said, at My Pets Wellness, we're working to foster an environment where these pieces that Dr. Rodney has taken us through are part of your daily routine just as much as working and everything else. We want you to feel safe and we want you to deal with the normal pressures and stresses before it becomes, burnout. So, Dr. Rodney, thank you so much for talking to me today, sir.
Very much.
All right. And we will see you next week on our next episode of the My Pets Wellness Weekly Wellness Podcast. Thanks so much for joining in. And if you want to check us out, please go to mypetswellness.net. And you can learn all about where we are and opportunities that we have. Thank you.